Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to inflict a fallout from the cruise lecturing activities upon you today because one of the things I'm going to ask you to do is join me in learning the chorus to a sea shanty that is relevant to the topic of the day. Now, it won't appear immediately irrelevant to you, but I promise I'll get to it just momentarily. So if I could have the next slide, and you need to press it for, there you go. All right. Excellent. What I'll ask you, I'll go through this chorus, and then I'll ask you to join me in the chorus, and then I'll sing a short verse. We'll do the chorus again. This was a capstan shanty. Sea shanties were work songs. The navies of the time, particularly the English-speaking navies, the American and the Royal Navy, did not use shanties, but all of the merchant sailors used them. And the idea, this was before the advent of steam winches and steam-assisted raising of the sails. So everything had to be in time. There were shanties to haul on lines that raised yards up the mast and sails up the mast. There were shanties for pumping. You had to pump every day, and it was all manual. And there were shanties for capstans when you were raising the anchor, and everybody was pushing on the bar at the same time. So this one, there is a definite beat. Hoorah, hoorah, for the gals of Dublin Town. You can feel the beat, and that's what the shantyman was, and the chorus was. They were trying to stay in time, so they would have better mechanical advantage.
So you're challenging us to stay in time.
Of course. So the chorus goes, hoorah, hoorah, for the gals of Dublin Town. Hoorah, for the bonny green flag and the harp without the crown. 'Twas on the 17th of March we came to New York Bay. Our captain, being Irish, had to celebrate that day. Hoorah, hoorah, for the gals of Dublin Town. Hoorah, for the bonny green flag and the harp without the crown. Give yourselves a hand because you sound exactly like a bunch of Irish sailors coming into New York wanting to go to South Street on Manhattan Island and imbibe a bit. There's another shanty and a line goes, I've spent all me tin down on South Street drinkin' gin. So that's now that you're in the proper mood for that. Next slide, please. This is the bonny green flag. It purports to be the flag originally of Brian Boru, an 11th century king, the first one that united all of Ireland. And you can see it's a gold Irish harp on the green background. And the reason that the Irish are singing to the harp without the crown is that during Tudor times and before, when Britain and England conquered Ireland, they took that symbol, put it in the royal coat of arms, and put an English crown on the top of it. So the Irish always sing to the harp without the crown. The next slide will show us what leads to the relevance of the shanty you just learned. This is the bonny blue flag. It originally was the flag of the short-lived Republic of West Florida. Capital was Baton Rouge in 1810. Lasted for about 9 months until that whole area came in to the United States of America. But when the Civil War broke out, or just before it, this flag became the symbol and the unofficial flag, even though the stars and bars later came in, but the unofficial flag of the rebellion. It was known as the Bonnie Blue Flag, and it was an Irish lad who took the tune that we just learned together and set new words to it. Hoorah, hoorah, for Southern rights, hurrah, hurrah for the bonny blue flag that bears a single star. And that song and this flag were displayed at almost every social function throughout the South throughout the war. So it became sort of the unofficial symbol. And General Hood's Texas divisions also flew that flag. Of course, it was a Texas symbol as well. So we can move on to our topic today, now that we've gotten in the proper mood here. We're going to talk about the Confederates on the Northwest Coast and their secret rebel societies. There are two tales of the Navy during the Civil War that we're going to be examining. First of all, we'll look at the efforts of the Confederates in Europe to acquire and arm both commerce raiders and to build or to acquire ironclad vessels, ironclad rams, and bring them back across the Atlantic. And the reason that they turned to France and England was that they were much better equipped industrially to construct vessels than was the South, which was, as you know, largely agrarian. Then the other aspect that we're going to look at is the Confederates in the West. We're going to talk about the raiders. This one is the Confederate state ship Shenandoah, a very, very technologically advanced vessel. Had a self-furling topsail that you could just be on deck and haul on a halyard to furl it, rather than having to send the men up the shrouds and ratlins to the topsail and get out in this topsail yard to furl it. It had the propeller on a ship is called the screw. It had a lifting screw so that when they were under sail alone, conserving coal, they lifted the shaft and the screw up into the hull and cut down on drag from the propeller blades. And this smokestack here is a telescoping smokestack, so that when they wanted to disguise the ship and convince the merchantmen that they were sneaking up on, that they were just a harmless sailing vessel, they collapsed it and it went into the deck. So it was, and this was the last of the Confederate raiders. But in addition to the raiders, then, we'll look at the secret societies and their genesis. How did secret societies in California, Oregon, Washington Territory, and British Canada, British Columbia and Victoria, how did they spring up, and why were they forced to be secret, and how did they come to be on the coast to begin with? So as we look at the next slide, no discussion of Confederates on the Northwest Coast is complete without a little talk about this gentleman. Now, I'm going to talk about a Confederate on the Northwest Coast just prior to the Civil War, when we talk about George Edward Pickett of Pickett's Charge at Gettysburg. But we will be dealing mostly with events in the later part of the war. But as the war began, George Pickett was a Union Army captain on our own San Juan Island, commanding a company, mostly Irish, of Union troops, because the ownership of San Juan Island was in dispute. The reason it was in dispute was that the Treaty of 1846 was ambiguous as to where the border should be drawn from the 49th parallel as it reached the Strait of Georgia, and then the language was, and then following the main channel to the Strait of Juan de Fuca. But they didn't define main channels. So the Brits said, well, of course, the main channel is Rosario. Furthest west, or furthest east, gives us the San Juans. We said, oh, no, it's Canal de Haro, Haro Strait. Furthest west gives us all of it. And while they were disputing this, the British had a Hudson's Bay Company farm, Bellevue Farm, on the island, and they had a Hudson's Bay Company sub-factor on the island as well. And the American squatters were moving in and starting little gardens and running a few animals. And Mr. Griffin's pig was rustling around in one of the squatters' potato patches, and the squatter shot him, only casualty in the war. And George was ordered by his superior to take his troops to San Juan Island. Now, this caused a lot of different problems because George, who was a very, very brave fellow, was also a little mercurial and not the sharpest knife in the drawer. And he almost brought us into war, a shooting war with Great Britain on the eve of the Civil War. George was last in his class at West Point. He was decorated for bravery in the Mexican War, and he was a very inspiring leader to his troops. He was a great raconteur. He loved to party. He loved a story. He wore his hair in ringlets, if you will, all the way down to the shoulders, perfumed. And he was a bit mercurial in his personality. So fortunately, the cooler heads prevailed among both the British and the Americans. His superior, Silas Casey, Fort Casey is named after him, was able to make sure that George didn't open fire on the British frigates in Griffin Bay, and likewise Admiral Baines and the captain in charge of those three frigates, Geoffrey Phipps Hornby, said, we don't really want to start this war. So it was agreed finally with the help of Winfield Scott, who was the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Army, who came all the way out here to negotiate with Governor Douglas of the Crown Colony of Vancouver, that joint occupation would ensue on San Juan Island until they could settle it by arbitration. So George, this happened in 1859. 1861, he was still there. He'd been relieved and had come back, but he decided to go offer his sword to the South. And so he left a son here by his second wife. It was a frontier marriage to a Haida woman of some high degree in the Haida tribe. She died in childbirth. His son James, Jimmy, was born. He left $100 with a friend up here in Mason County to raise him. Couldn't get down to say goodbye and took off. But his widow, Sally, after the war, after he died in I think 1874, throughout her life, and she lived well into the 20th century, was as long as Jimmy was alive, she corresponded with him, sent him artifacts from his father's military career, etc. So it wasn't a completely tragic story. Well, on to
Where's Pickett from?
Pickett is from Virginia. Yes, he's grew up on the James, as a matter of fact, and he was a proud Virginian soldier, although after Gettysburg he pouted. He turned to drink, more to drink than usual, and Lee became very unhappy with his behavior, and then he had a few disasters militarily, and Lee's final remark about him as they were marching toward Appomattox and he caught a glimpse of Pickett was, "Is that man still in my army?"